It's Freedom Fighters time and Plastic Man shenanigans time. Batman the Brave and the Bold animated series was well known for playing with many eras of DC Comics, with some special love shown to the Silver Age, but it pulled from all over. It was also known for showcasing some lesser known heroes. For some, this series became the place where they first encountered some less utilized characters. Cry Freedom Fighters is likely such an occurrence. And it's an interesting outing that hails the comic the characters initially appear in some interesting ways. Not their first appearances, their first appearance together. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and it's time to explore some animated fare. Cry Freedom Fighters is the 22nd episode of the second season of Batman Brave and the Bold, first airing on November 12th of 2010. It was written by Thomas Pugsley and Stephen Melching and was directed by Ben Jones. It also has one of the rare Batman-less openings. Well, kind of. He's not seen or heard. Blue Beetle does call him at the end of it, but the team up at the start is Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, and Stargirl, and it's fun. Now, as for the episode proper, aside from the fact that Cry Freedom makes me think about that Denzel Washington movie, it opens on voter tampering. This entire episode is going to be focused on patriotic themes, more overt ones. It's going to have questions surrounding what does it mean to be a patriot? Is it all about being very politically engaged in a very obvious way, taking part in historical activities, traditions, knowing all the dates, those kind of things. This is going to be played out between Uncle Sam and Plastic Man, who are going to have very different ways of embodying it.
Ooh, the circus is in town.
Batman bumps into Plastic Man while he's trying to stop this fraud from occurring, and Plastic Man's completely oblivious to the fact that there is any voting going on, even though there are signs everywhere. He is in his usual comedic relief sidekick kind of mode for this. Now, in terms of who's tampering, they're not actually people from Earth. They're aliens from another world. They're from Qward, and they're here to meddle in the goings-on. And because of the overt themes, it can be easy for some to potentially read into this episode and infer some things that it may be saying, whether it's attempting to or not. Now, in general, this is an interesting use for Qward, which many may be familiar with, and the Weaponeers as the antimatter world, where Sinestro first got his yellow ring. This antimatter universe first debuted in Green Lantern #2 in 1960. At least that was its beginnings. Its lore has been fleshed out over time. And the Qwardian who warns them in this teletag is also from that issue. Here they're fascistic alien baddies. Well, at least the leaders are. The people are being oppressed. Uncle Sam arrives to help them fight the alien menace.
That's a vote against tyranny, son.
And Uncle Sam debuted in National Comics #1 in 1940. His appearance is based off of those patriotic/propaganda posters. And like those posters, he's meant to embody the spirit of America. Now, Uncle Sam was originally a Quality character from Quality Comics, not that he's Quality. I definitely think that that's why they named the company that, so that you could say it like that. They're Quality Comics. He was created by Will Eisner and Dave Berg, and as mentioned, is the personification of the spirit of America, with a mythic origin, with him either being a soldier who died in the Revolutionary War of 1776 and became the spirit, or the spirit was there already and then that soldier was infused with it, or whether or not it's just something that's changing shapes over time. Regardless, his powers are proportional to the amount that people believe in American ideals, in the American dream. You could do some dark, cynical takes on Uncle Sam. This episode is not that. Nor did I expect it to be. This is a children's cartoon. And while it does sometimes play with darker themes, they're more character-based than social commentary-based. This entire episode, however, is walking a tightrope between trying to be comedic but also being earnest. But because of the subject matter, when it veers more comedic, it could come across like it's making fun of the concept. I'm very curious as to how it lands for people. Uncle Sam in this is voiced by Peter Renaday, who voiced Abraham Lincoln in The Hall of Presidents and other times. Evil Con Carne, I always think about how he was OG Splinter though. Now, while Plastic Man admires Uncle Sam, he himself is not steeped in Americana and your traditional kind of patriotism.
Can I assume you're as patriotic as Batman?
Well, you could assume that, sure.
But he does jump at the offer to join the Freedom Fighters, even though they can sense that he's faking a lot of his patriotism. Thing is, he just wants to be part of a team. He even says he was kicked off of the Justice League. I want more details. I can see them kicking him off, but I want to know why. So with the invite issued, even though Dollman is really not here for it, Plastic Man becomes a freedom fighter.
Give me a chance to be a part of something. To prove to myself that I'm not a 3-time loser.
So, who are the Freedom Fighters? The Freedom Fighters were an assembly of Quality Comics characters who were all placed together. Originally, they had been operating independently when they had first been created in the Golden Age, but when they are assembled in the Bronze, it's as a team, and there's a reason for that. Now, post-1956 and Quality's bankruptcy, those characters found themselves over at DC. The grouping that we have put together here includes Uncle Sam, Dollman, the Human Bomb, the Ray, Phantom Lady, and Black Condor. And Len Wein brought them together for Justice League 107 in 1973. The story, Crisis on Earth X, with an attempt to do an even bigger crossover story than the 100th issue annual, because they were doing annual JLA JSA crossovers at the time. And the last one had brought back the 7 Soldiers of Victory. We did an entire video on those issues specifically, because we've been going through the crises leading up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. so I will leave a link to that down below. But he does discuss in detail why he chose them. When Quality folded, DC had acquired the rights to their titles and continued publishing several of them, especially the ones I just mentioned. The Quality characters seemed the next likely choice for revival. I went through the list of Quality characters and settled on the 6 you're about to meet. Since the Quality characters had known their heyday mostly during the Second World War, I contrived a way to set my story in a world where the war had ended very differently. Now, Plastic Man was also originally a Quality Comics character, debuting in Police Comics number 1 in 1941, as do Phantom Lady and the Human Bomb. The former is Sandra Knight, the daughter of a senator who fought crime with a special kind of black light weapon. The latter is a scientist who is working on a special chemical, 27 QRX, with his dad when Nazis try to steal it. They kill his father, but he attempts to protect the chemical by ingesting it, and this gives him the power to then explode things when he touches them with his hands. The Ray was Happy Terrell, who debuted in Smash Comics number 14 in 1940. He got his powers by being exposed to a cosmic storm. Those rays out there in space causing problems for people decades before the Fantastic Four. Don't go up there. He was a reporter going up there for a scoop. Not worth it, well maybe, because it gave him the power to transform into light and also project light energy. Dollman, Daryl Dane, my beloved, we did a whole retrospective on him. His original adventures are really fun. He debuted in Feature Comics 27 in 1939, and he developed a serum that let him shrink. He's one of those get small characters. I do find it amusing that this episode gave him a very angry personality.
Something tells me you're not the patriot you pretend to be.
He did not have that personality in the comics, at least not the original ones. Again, some of these characters have become legacy characters, and so there are different characterizations to pull from, and sometimes this series will just pick and choose. Now, Black Condor, the episode actually preserves most of his costume. It does make it a tad more low. This is so that it can avoid the conundrum of do we or do we not draw male nipples. They just make them lower than it. But essentially, that's the costume he always had. This is Richard Gray Jr., and he debuts in Crack Comics number 1 in 1940. He survived his parents being murdered by bandits in Mongolia, and he's raised by condors. He even teaches himself to fly, defying nature itself just because he's around them. His origin's amazing. Still within him is a yearning to fly. Once, in a wild attempt to imitate his feathered brethren, he leaps from a cliff, only to plummet to earth in a heap. Again, his life is saved by the old condor, his foster mother. The first failure only sharpens his desire to fly. And during the following years, he puts his keen mind to the task of studying the movements of wings, the body motions, air currents, balance, and levitation. At last, his determination is rewarded by success. The young birds now have a companion in the air. This Jungle Book fanfic went off the rails. I'm telling you all this because the episode does not. It names them and shows them. But as mentioned, some of the versions have legacy characters and many people have taken on the mantle. And so, for example, what you have here for Phantom Lady looks like the Stormy Night version, not the Sandra Knight version. The Stormy Night version is from 2006 and debuted in Battle for Bloodhaven number 2. The costume just looks more like hers, as does how she's utilizing the powers, which are much more overt. Even though the original Sandra Knight would get powers eventually in the 70s for a bit, and it doesn't end up really mattering which version it is because they're just shown. You don't really get to see too much about them. Now, as for the freedom fighters themselves, they also have an interesting history in terms of how they were used. They're originally presented as from Earth X, a world where the Axis won World War II. As mentioned, this was done so that the characters could be presented at their height as wartime heroes. Although it must be mentioned that Golden Age characters, while many of them did have wartime adventures because they're being published during that time, they also have a whole host of other adventures, sometimes going in vastly different directions. Supernatural, standard crime, mystery, and sometimes when they're depicted going forward, it's made seem as if they only had wartime or espionage type stories, but that's just not the case. There is a lot more you can do with them. That's definitely something that happens to the freedom fighters because of how they're represented. They end up being repackaged as these kind of uber patriotic heroes, and it ignores a lot of the other types of things that they did before. Some of them managed to get it back, some of them less so. Now, after saving their Earth with the help of the Justice League and the JSA and Justice League 107 and 108, sometime after, the freedom fighters migrate from Earth X to Earth 1. And in 1976, they were given their own series. Where they came to the main Earth, they ended up being mistaken for criminals. It was a series that ended up being canceled during the implosion. And that was how it stood. But then came All-Star Squadron and Roy Thomas, and that series loved to retcon so many things. Some of them really worked, others less so. I would argue that this may have been a less so. Here the freedom fighters are then retconned as to having always been from Earth 2, and instead they migrated over to Earth X with Uncle Sam to help that world. Not only that, but there was a first team who met an untimely end. It's one of those retcons that ends up causing a few more questions and holes than the one that it's trying to plug, which is smaller, because the original question it's trying to deal with, or it seems, was why did Dr. Fate of Earth 2 or the Earth 1 heroes not seem to know about these other heroes? Where were their versions? It also seems to have been a way to rope in more characters and maybe just play a bit more with Earth X. It's a cool story, but it makes things way more convoluted than they were before. It's one of those things where really not every single gap needs to be plugged. Sometimes it's okay to let those things kind of float or hang. Sometimes it's even fun to just let fans kind of try and fill them in themselves, but that's a lot of what All-Star Squadron does, trying to plug every single little gap. I love that series, but it really does do that. Another way this kind of makes this messy is that in the original Justice League story, Plastic Man is shown as a freedom fighter who dies. Again, all of the continuity has shifted down since, so all of this is moot, but at the time, messy. Now, post-Crisis, there would be different versions of the freedom fighters, but always with Uncle Sam at the helm and some variation of this iconic lineup. This episode goes for the more classic what the team does, though. The episode very much plays with the idea that they're just uber-patriotic heroes. Now, there is a Convergence comic, Plastic Man and the Freedom Fighters, but that's from 2015, so after this episode. I wonder if this episode helped influence some of that. I'm very curious, the order of things. Now, in this episode, the team are headed to Qward, because Uncle Sam had received a message from them warning them about the Weaponeers trying to interfere with Earth. And so Uncle Sam feels that he needs to go save that person, and also they should probably try and liberate Qward.
I'm about to let freedom ring.
Now, this is one of those moments where there are deeper ways that one could look at it, such as it potentially being an examination of involvement in foreign political happenings. However, if that's happening, it's most likely incidental and not what the episode is going for. The tone of it is very much more focused on Plastic Man and where he fits in. Although, of course, as with everything, there can be layers, multiple reads. So the team and Batman head to Qward. This is one of those we don't really need Batman here episodes, but he's here, his name is in the title. Now, Plastic Man is trying to prove himself not just useful, but necessary. He's trying to ingratiate himself into the team, and there is some really fun physical comedy moments that ensue. They use Plastic Man very well in Batman Brave and the Bold in general. Also, the concept of people being low-key done with Plastic Man, kind of annoyed by him, it's a character staple at this point. Now, the Freedom Fighters and Batman try to convince the civilians to help them, but they're too afraid of reprisals. Now, as all this is going on, Uncle Sam is also being drained of his power. He's far away from the source of all the patriotism. Now, the people's refusal to help them is treated as understandable, and I have to say, looking at them, they really look like Qward, Sinestro's people, the ones that he was oppressing back when he was a Green Lantern. The Freedom Fighters sneak into the Capitol and attack, and it goes poorly. They're overwhelmed, Sam's powers dwindle, everyone's knocked out. Plastic Man only grabs Uncle Sam. Priorities. Batman can wait. This does lead to the most heartfelt moment of the episode, which is the conversation between Plastic Man and Uncle Sam, but what it means to believe in the ideals of patriotism in America. Plastic Man is lamenting to the dying Uncle Sam that he's a fraud because he doesn't know about the facts and those kind of things. And Uncle Sam consoles them with the idea that that's not what it's really about. It's about what's in your heart.
Memorizing names and dates doesn't make you a patriot. That comes from the heart and can't be faked.
He then Star Warses away, leaving Plastic Man. So Plastic Man has to have one of those now I have to prove myself really useful and save the day type of moments, and his way to do that is to rally the people. He wants to fill them with the spirit to resist. This is presented as akin to the American spirit, and as he's able to rally them to fight with a botched/comedic/misremembered version of Yankee Doodle, and he gets everybody to sing it when they go in, which is a very memorable image. It's presenting the idea that it's the thought that counts, and that energy can come from anywhere, and so it's able to revive Uncle Sam, and he comes back more powerful than ever. He's boosted, and so he's able to boost everybody. Batman gets this costume that has some Captain America accents, his little wings on the top. The knockout freeze frames throughout this episode have had the red, white, and blue in them, but in this climactic battle, it's even more. Side note, the song has a bit of a sing-along format at points. I'm curious how many kids actually sang this, then kept singing it after. Not mine, but I'm sure some did. And so Qward is freed, and as for the fallout, we never have time for that. Back to Earth. Plastic Man has proved that his heart is in the right place. You know what? He can be on the Freedom Fighters. And then we get one last joke of him being thanked by the president, who is clearly President Obama, and then Plastic Man doesn't know who he is. All laugh, the end. This is not one of the stronger episodes of the series. That's not to say it's bad. This is to say that it's not overly memorable or doesn't have too many moments that stand out. And then on top of that, it does have some moments where the balance of the comedy and genuineness doesn't quite land. It's not exactly struck. However, this episode has its usual humor and the fun elements the series is known for, and it is attempting to be heartfelt, presenting a message that you don't need to follow everything by the book or exactly as people expect to be full of the energy of a particular movement, that your heart can be in the right place and it can still inspire people. However, how much this episode leans into the patriotism humor split makes it a tad uneven. It's also an episode where Batman is pushed to the back and the guest stars are pushed to the front. And while Plastic Man and Uncle Sam stand out, the rest of the Freedom Fighters feel very incidental. It wouldn't be too different of an episode if you removed most of them. It would just have made the fights harder. But Batman in this series has fought more people with less people beside him. The Freedom Fighters don't end up really standing out too much, aside from visually and a couple of power highlights. but you don't really get a sense of who they are or anything as you do with some of the other characters who are featured overall in this series. This, interestingly, has a similar energy to their first outing in Justice League 107, which is also an issue where they're overthrowing an oppressive regime. But in that, while they attempt to have each character have a moment, they also don't get the full chance to shine, although they get more to do there than they do here. I don't even think Human Bomb speaks in this episode. He does have a sassy snap and explode thing though, and that's cool. And it must be said, this is a chance for people to see them, so it is a way for people to get to know that these characters exist, and it may make them curious about them. Maybe people saw them and thought they were really cool and want to know more. You get a base sense of their abilities, some more than others, but again, just compared to how some of the other obscure characters are showcased, they don't stand out quite as much. Perhaps that's because they're so tied together in the Freedom Fighters package. Personally, I almost wonder how it would have been to feature some of them individually, but again, historically, because of Justice League 107, people associate them together. And of course, also what came after, because from then they were a unit. At the end of this episode ends up being fairly standard. And Plastic Man, as always, is well utilized. This episode, however, is one I can see potentially bothering some, depending upon how they took it and how much they want to analyze it or how they're going to approach it. We've all seen hour-long video essays on less, or maybe you haven't. If you have not, just know that they are out there. Some of the things that people may want to pull more on or examine more and potentially take issue with or just think about more, it's potentially seeing the freedom fighters as analogous to how America should conduct foreign policy, or that American-style patriotism is the correct brand that should be adopted worldwide or galaxy-wide. I can see some taking that read, although personally, I don't think that that's what the episode's intent was overall. The way I received it is that it's going for the idea that concepts of inspiration and fighting tyranny are universal. But again, I can see some having a different read. Also, I'm not American, so I'm very curious how it reads for people who are. Let me know all your thoughts. Let's try not to make it fraught. I know sometimes things can get intense. However, I always love talking about this show. It was cool to look at an adapted version of these characters after going back through the history of some of them. Let me know any other episodes you want to touch on. Please do all the YouTube things, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to discuss comics and comic adjacent things with me. There is always more videos coming soon, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.